should the United States launch their missiles to hit the Russian Federation, we detect these missiles, we determine their trajectory. If we are sure that the missiles are heading towards vital centers of the Russian Federation, we immediately launch the missiles.
We gaan zo dadelijk beginnen met onze paneldiscussie. Die discussie zal in het Engels plaatsvinden. Ik zou dus graag naar voren willen roepen meneer Alexander Shulgin. Marie-Thérèse Haar. En Marcel de Graaff. Joost Niemöller. And John Laughland, please. Okay. Please, take a chair, sit down. Okay. Well, today's theme is understanding the conflict in Ukraine. And we're going to talk about this with our panel. We're going to talk about, of course, the current situation, but also the causes of it, and maybe most important, what the consequences may be and will probably be. But first, I will introduce our panel. On your left, Mr. Alexander Shulgin, ambassador of Russia in the Netherlands. Marie-Thérèse Haar, probably one of the most important experts on Russia, founder of the Russia and Eastern Europe Academy, lecturer, writer. Thank you for being here. Mr. Marcel de Graaff, member of the European Parliament for Forum for Democratie. Mr. Joost Niemöller, you have met him before. And Mr. John Laughland. Mr. Shulgin, I would like to start with you, if that's okay. Welcome. I'm very happy and honored that you could make time for this event. And what I wanted to ask you is this. In the Western countries, like the European Union and the United States, Russia's military intervention in Ukraine has been strongly condemned. Was that something that was expected in Russia? Did it come more or less as a surprise, or was it anticipated? Yes, please.
First of all, I would like to say how happy I am here to be here with you. I am very grateful. I am very grateful to the invitation by Thierry Baudet, and I will try to contribute to the discussion very humbly, very modestly, and I will be even more eager to participate in the discussion since an alternative point of view in the public space is not immediately discernible. Well, having said this, coming back to your question, did Russia anticipate this violent reaction coming from the Western countries? The answer, yes, we did. And actually it was easily predictable. You know, the Americans have been hugely investing in Ukraine so as to render Ukraine very hostile to the Russian Federation, to make Ukraine kind of anti-Russia. Both the current president of the United States and previous presidents have been guided by the precept, by the tenet, whose author is one of the most hawkish American politicians. I'm referring to Zbigniew Brzezinski, who used to say that Ukraine, being closer to Russia, being friendly to Russia, is not a good thing, because it makes Russia greater, it gives it status of great power. Conversely, Ukraine disconnected from Russia is a very good thing, since it will relegate Russia to the backbenches of the world policy. The European Union also have been trying to make Ukrainians choose between us, referring to the European Union, and them, referring to the Russian Federation. It was just very artificial choice, and it was, by the way, one of the causes of the Maidan. So the Americans have been trying to influence, have been trying to permeate all of the Ukrainian state machinery. You can easily trace down aides, consultants, all kinds of advisors at all the levels of the state machinery in Ukraine, to the effect that one can say this is actually shadow government. They have the say in all the important decisions. So for all these reasons, I think that the United States and the European Union have been very upset and disappointed with what happened, and we know what kind of reaction followed from the US and the European Union.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, thank you. Could Russia have, yes. Could Russia have done something different to solve the problem, to prevent this war? For instance, in a more diplomatic way, or was there any other choice besides this intervention?
Like I said, we resorted to the military operation because actually we had absolutely no other choice. But we didn't shy away from the diplomacy. We are still committed to a diplomatic solution. A few days after the start of Russian special military operation, Ukrainians suggested that we talk. We held a series of talks, and back in March at the meeting in Istanbul, Ukrainians for the first time submitted their ideas in a written form. We treated these ideas as a basis for further discussion, and we just we are willing to go ahead. But you know, speaking of the diplomatic solutions, we have been trying to push forward for the implementation of the Minsk agreements. The advantage of these agreements was that they provided for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Self-proclaimed republics, Luhansk and Donetsk, stood ready to remain within Ukraine, provided special status with some basic elementary things like the right of speaking the Russian language, the right to having their say in appointing local police commanders, the right to keep special relations with the Russian Federation. But President Zelensky has rejected. He gave up on the Minsk agreements. And as we learned lately, Ukraine has been gearing up for military solution to resolve the Donbas issue. And there were plans to start this operation as early as the 8th of March this year. Along with this effort, speaking of the Minsk agreements, We have been trying to discuss security issues with both the United States and NATO. We tried to remind them of this fundamental principle enshrined in the OSCE documents, that is, nobody should strengthen the security of their country at the expense of the security of other countries. And back in December last year, we submitted draft treaties both to the United States and NATO. It was basically about three key elements. First element, no further eastward NATO expansion. Second element, return to the configuration of NATO at the moment of signing of the fundamental act between Russia and the NATO back in 1997. And finally, the most important thing, non-deployment of striking weapon systems threatening vital interests of each country. Because, you know, we know all too well that once Ukraine is admitted to NATO, there may be striking systems, missile systems deployed at, just at the border with the Russian Federation, to the effect that should these missiles be fired, the flying time will be of only 5 or 6 minutes. It will be not enough to take the decision. For the time being, Russian strategy is a halfway response. Should the United States launch their missiles to hit the Russian Federation, we detect these missiles, we determine their trajectory. If we are sure that the missiles are heading towards vital centers of the Russian Federation, we immediately launch the missiles. In our turn, both missiles, the Americans and the Russians, at some point will encounter themselves. American will continue towards Russia, Russian will continue to the United States, and this is mutual guaranteed destruction. But with the systems of just 5 minutes time to reach the Kremlin, it's quite impossible. It's a very, very serious threat. So we tried both diplomatic way, the Minsk agreements, so they tried to persuade them to accept our proposals, to no avail. They dismissed this disdainfully, saying, no, we will not accept this. This is all about the NATO open doors policy. We will admit to NATO whoever we want to. Well, and let me remind you of what the Pope Francis said recently. He was cited as saying that maybe what is happening now may have been averted. And probably the cause is NATO barking at the gates of the Russian Federation.
Yes. Thank you. Marcel, economic sanctions have since been imposed on Russia. Restrictions on participation in international payment transactions, for example, in order to put pressure on Russia. How much do you think these sanctions affect Russia? Do they really hurt the Russian economy?
Well, as far as I can see, the Russian economy is, I wouldn't immediately say booming, yeah, but it's definitely growing. So if
like John said.
Yeah, and that's because the strengthened ties between Russia and the non-NATO world. That's basically what's happening, and it's not wide open in the Dutch press. But the Russian Federation is part of the BRICS, and more countries around the world are applying to become member of the BRICS. So what you see is that we have a very fast growth of power of the BRICS countries, which is a countervailing power towards the NATO and the United States, and that is also a huge market. So Russia is selling its oil, its gas to China, to India. The sales to India are booming. And then, when you look at the European Union, we thought, well, we have this cheap gas from Russia, so let's build another pipeline. We have already Nord Stream 1, let's open Nord Stream 2. And then indeed, Joe Biden said, well, we're going to make sure that that's not going to happen. And it's not happening. They, I think they provoked the war in Ukraine so that the conflict between the European Union and Russia would become so big that these sanctions would actually hurt the European Union. And they're hurting.
What will the consequences be for the population in Europe, for the European countries?
What the first consequence will be, and that is that cutting off gas from Germany is destroying German industry. Yeah. And you know that the Netherlands, for Germany is for the Netherlands the largest partner, economic partner, where our export depend for about, what is it, 50% on Germany. So the destroyed German industry is the end of the European Union project as a whole. Yeah. Germany and the Netherlands are funding the euro and the economies of the southern countries, southern member states. So what was actually, I think, very clever from the United States is to involve the European Union, which are, what is it, a protectorate of the United States, to get the war basically at the border of the European Union, so that the European Union will go down. It's never a good thing when you are the monarch, when you are the king of the world, to have a vassal, to have a protectorate, which becomes perhaps even stronger than you. So kill it off. And that's what's happening with these sanctions.
Coming back to Germany, as the most important power behind the European economy, one would expect major resistance from the major stakeholders, the captains of industry, because they are going to get hurt, and their companies are going to get hurt by shortages of energy. Is there, it was planned that there would be also a member of the European Parliament from Germany today here, but he couldn't come. So I'll ask you, is there any noticeable resistance from these regions?
Well, to get to the point that we would actually sanction the import of Russian gas and oil, that was a long way. We didn't get there immediately. And one of the first reasons for that was the resistance of Germany. Germany said, well, we can sanction whatever you want, whoever you want, so let's sanction these oligarchs and their families. That's, you know, that's for an industry, that's fine. I mean, these people, they fly around the world or not, and as long as I have my gas and oil, things are fine. So that were easy sanctions. But then things got worse and worse, and the resistance of the German industrials was quite strong.
Okay.
But who owns Germany?
Good question.
Who owns Germany? We had this example from John on the stairs of the White House, and we have Scholz, and Scholz is just nodding, yes, yes, Mr. Joe, or whoever you are, a clone, or whatever he is. He's not the real. He's of course not the real president. It's also fiction. So these people there in the United States who are really the puppet masters, they are also the puppet masters over Germany. So they had to give in. The pressure became this strong that Germany had to give in to these sanctions and said yes. But mind you, they have an oil reserve or a gas reserve to have this industry going for like 16 days.
Yeah.
And after 16 days, it's over. So, to some extent, I'm quite happy with that because I really hate the European Union. and it looks like we're seeing the end of it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. Marie-Thérèse, there seems to exist an extended history of tension between Russia and the European countries. How would you explain that? Is it because of strategic reasons? We talked about some. Or is there also an incompatible cultural difference between Russia and Western Europe? Is there some misunderstanding? What will you say?
I'm a little bit amazed about your question. And of course, there are differences in thousand-year history. Yeah, then we had a Tsar who was against Europe, and then Europe was a little bit against Russia. But in general, Peter, I'm amazed, because my mission, and I think we have 1,000 years history with each other. It's not only religion, but we are looking the same people.
Yeah.
We have green eyes, we have blonde hair, you have the same building. And of course, when you have the Tsars, when you think about your wonderful Peter the Great, how we went to Amsterdam, and even Catherine the Great, how she came from Germany, and later Tolstoy's, Turgenev's, Dostoevsky, who they want to go, and how they met Goethe and Schiller, you know, and even in the 19th, well, I came there in the communistic time, I felt that my friends were so proud of being part of Europe, or the opposite, that they said, we belong to each other. And I'm convinced of that. And that's why it's such a pity today that in so many years, 1,000 years, that we lost Russia. I think it's an awful thing. Yeah. They are looking now in the first time for 1,000 years, and I think it will be decades. I think that John Laughland said it. For decades they will go and look to Asia, India, the East, of course. But you know, even what already went wrong in, I'm not speaking about Yeltsin time. It was very difficult after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But I'm speaking, Peter, in the beginning of the Putin time. Well, even till 2014, Maidan crisis. You cannot imagine how pro-European Putin was, or the Russian government. And only 3 examples about what I'm thinking. Do you remember when Putin was in the same age, same time as Bush, Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, and that he offered help with 9/11 to go together the battle for the terrorism. And then a few months later came that wonderful speech of Putin in Germany, Berlin, in the Reichstag, when he asked as well, or he said, we always have been part of the European house. And of course there has to be a lot of done in Russia. And sometimes we are like Peter the Great, we want to adopt a lot of things and to learn from you in the West. But he told, and he was asking it repeatedly, we are in the European house. We want to be part of the European house. And he even, you will mention it, he even spoke about NATO. He was swallowing the first enlargement of NATO. After that, he had to swallow the second one. and then the notorious 2008 Bucharest summit with the NATO. But in the beginning, you know, Putin offered to be part of NATO. And I still think, what happened with us? You know, because the mainstream media propaganda, it's not only after MH17. It's not only after this catastrophic in Ukraine now. But I think, I was living there, I was working there. And I saw in the beginning with Putin times that it was already our Western media, and maybe, especially our country, focused on England, the Anglo-Saxon model, and America. It was already in the beginning wrong. It was Putin, KGB, with his beady, cunning eyes. Yeah, it was Chechnya, the war. It was, and of course, I know there are a lot of things still to be done in Russia. But you know, when you, because I lived in the Yeltsin time, I've never seen such a failed state. And it was such a pity I hoped for a Marshall Plan in that time. It was important. Because they asked for our hand and to work together for the future. But there were so many prostitutes, so many poor people, so much criminality, so much problems that I'm still amazed what Putin and his government did in 20 years. It's amazing. And a lot... And it's a pity that a lot of politicians or a lot of mainstream media haven't been there and seen it with their own eyes. Yeah, it was only negative. It had no chance. And I was thinking and discovering what is happening. Why is it not allowed? In that time, I had no time, Peter, of the Wolfowitz doctrine, or about John Laughland was speaking about the Brzezinski. Yeah. But that Wolfowitz doctrine, it was already from the beginning. Yeah, there was no place for Russia. So it's as if I see it. Okay. And it's really a pity. What went wrong the last 10 years after the Maidan, of course.
And it can also lead to a very dangerous escalation, not only in Russia and Ukraine, but for the whole of the world. It's dangerous for all of humanity, I think. Are there still chances for de-escalation at the moment? And if yes, what would they be? Or if not, how would we expect the situation to develop from here? I don't know who would like to ask, maybe Mrs. Shulgin, or who would like to answer this question?
Well, like I said, we still hope that diplomatic solution may be possible. We submitted to the Ukrainians on April the 15th a draft of the settlement based on their ideas, written ideas. It was about neutral status of Ukraine, some guarantees to Ukraine, so that Ukraine does not pose any threat to the Russian Federation. Well, the Ukrainians did not come back. And we have serious grounds to believe that they have been prevented from doing so by their close allies from Washington and especially from London. Back then, Boris Johnson was the main advisor to Mr. Zelensky. President Putin, speaking maybe 2 days ago, reiterated our willingness to achieve a negotiated settlement, but the ball is on their side of pitch, on the Ukrainian side of pitch. We are still waiting for their reaction. And Putin also issued the warning. He said, the longer they will be delaying to resume talks with the Russian Federation, the harder it will be for them to negotiate. So this was actually a warning aimed at prompting the resumption of the talks.
Thank you. Thank you. There has even been talk about the possible use of tactical nuclear weapons. Could this become a reality? Maybe, John?
I think the American, is this working?
The other one.
I think the Americans are capable of launching a nuclear attack.
Yes?
Yes, I do. Because they don't have many other cards to play. I mentioned the emergence of a multipolar world order, which is exactly the thing they've been trying to prevent. One of the elements of this I didn't mention is, of course, the supremacy of the dollar. That's over now. Mm-hmm. It's over because, like the European Union, they have expropriated people, Russians. Who's going to put their money in a European or an American bank now? Plus, as you know, Russia has demanded that its gas and even food exports be paid in rubles. They huffed and they puffed, but they ended up paying. And that has sent the ruble to its highest level. The ruble of which Joe Biden said it had been reduced to rubble in March is now stronger than it has been for 7 or 8 years. And we're in an extraordinary position. It reminds me, there was a brief conflict in 1898 between France and Britain in Sudan. It's well known to British and French historians, Fashoda, where the French had a presence and the British came to get rid of them. And the French thought that they had a right to be there, but the British ended up throwing them out. And the commander of the little garrison in this Fashoda said, well, we had the arguments, but they had the weapons.
Yeah.
And we're in this situation now. This hasn't been mentioned yet. We talked about missiles. Russia has deployed in this war hypersonic missiles on several occasions, which nobody in the West has. The Americans do not have missiles like that. We certainly don't have them. Russia has demonstrated its military superiority in this war. Military superiority. Those weapons, the Americans do not have them and cannot have them for several years. So we're in this extraordinary situation where Russia has superior weapons, it produces energy, gas, oil, and it produces food. The three things that every human being needs is energy, warmth, and food. Mm-hmm. And the third thing that every state needs is obviously the ability to defend itself through weaponry. So these are the absolute building blocks of human life and of politics. And on all those three counts, Russia, for the moment, seems to be in the ascendant. And that's why I say that if the Americans are psychopathic enough, yes, I think they might possibly do it.
Yeah. But it would mean self-destruction also for yes. The United States. Yes. But nevertheless, they would do it. Yes. You think?
Yes. Well, I'm not saying they will, but
they could do it.
I'm afraid I think the situation is exceptionally dangerous. Yeah. Exceptionally dangerous.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what will this end in? What will can there be a solution? Is there even a possible solution? Or will this be a conflict that will be fought to the bloody end? Marcel, how do you think about that?
Well, the United States is prepared to fight until the last Ukrainian. Mm-hmm. So, So Putin said, well, it probably will end there. The question is that enough for the United States? And it's not a little thing that is at stake. It's not like this country at the borders, at the end of Europe, which they're fighting over. They're fighting about the world dominance of the United States. Yeah. They are the police officer of the world since the fall of the Berlin Wall. So they have over 700 military bases all over the globe. And from there they basically dominate every country in the world. Okay. And they made a really huge mistake by pouring all their industry into China. Yeah. Because China has a population of 1 billion. The United States have 200 million. So you can never compete economically. You can never compete with China. The cost of labor will always be significantly lower than in the US. So economically you can't win. And if you then also give them the technology and give them the market, yeah, well, where will that end? That will end in the dominance of China. And then they partner with Russia, who have brilliant people. They're chess masters since the beginning of time. They can play chess like nobody else, also when it comes to military, and they have the superior military technology, but it's also being in production right now. They produce like hell. So where does that end? That ends in a situation where you have the master of the world being challenged by Russia and China. And then you can do what the Americans always did was playing the zero-sum game, and that is, we win, you lose. And now they're on the losing end, and that is that either they accept their loss, or they say, okay, if it's not win-lose, then it's lose-lose, and you go down with us. Yeah. And that is the frightening position we're in now. So, and they do have a bit of outdated nuclear arsenal with outdated missile systems.
But still destructive?
But still, I wouldn't like to be in that nuclear shower. No. So, yes, Russia can and will hit the US in that situation. And the US will hit Russia, even though a lot of these missiles will be intercepted. Then still, there will be a lot of them that hit Russia. So then we got this nuclear winter. Even if they don't hit us, if the nuclear winter arrives, it's like the Ice Age for at least 4 or 5 years.
For the whole of humanity.
Yeah, and that means that we then will become very hungry and probably die of cold.
Global warming.
Yeah, you would think that nuclear gives us a global warming, but it gives us basically a global cold because of the atmosphere being polluted. So, yes, I think that we need to return to common sense. Yeah. And common sense means be a good sport. If you lose, accept it.
But there's no common sense in a dying superpower.
At this moment, I point at wokeism. You know, you have this generals with pink hair, being a man dressing like a woman. And then to think that common sense will prevail there. Sorry.
That wouldn't be common sense.
So the only thing that we can hope for is, first, the Supreme Court in the United States, which still has common sense, and that they decide to basically take out Joe Biden. Next we get Kamala Harris, who I hope can add 1 to 1. That would be some math that she could probably handle, but not more complicated than that. So that we get a regime change in the United States, which would bring back common sense. That would be my last hope, basically. Or otherwise it would be, well, I'm buying this warm clothes already, so
Thank you. Joost.
Yeah, there's one point I would like to make, and that's I think we all make a very big mistake here. And it's not just us here, but it's in the whole Western world, that what you see is that we think that we are the main effect. We are going in a linear direction, to what's something what Dugan said, but going forward, we are the main or only players, and we look at the rest as only reacting. And then you have a choice. You can be a noble wild, the Indians or whatever, or the Africans, so you feel sorry for them, or you can be the devil like Putin. There's no other option. And I think the mistake we make is that we don't try to really look what China wants, what Russia wants, and in my opinion, it's hard to say, but they're not friends of us. What they want is their own world dominion, in a way, in some way. They're thinking about other ways of changing our world, and I'm not happy with that, because I'm Dutch, I'm Western, I'm glad with the kind of society we made. I see, at this moment, of course, I see more wrong than right in it, and that's also the case. But all the interesting American writers, for example, John Mearsheimer is a good example of it. He wrote, well, maybe we do something wrong, the effect will be bad for us, the Russians will react in a bad way, so we have to change our way. And it's always the way of thinking, we do something, they just react. But that's not the case. Russia wants something from itself. That's also one of the reasons why there's a war in Ukraine. Not because they react on us, not because they say, oh, NATO was coming too close to us. No, they have their own objections, they have their own ideas. And we have to look after that without being, like what you see a lot here, is just, I mean, not really looking at it, not really trying what Putin or other people or Putin is really saying. And I think then in that way you get a very wrong impression on the world, and then what suddenly you see that people are very surprised. Oh, Putin is coming into his, where is that? That comes just out of nothing. That's what you heard. Just, we had a good world, and just out of there comes Putin, and he's taking us, our things away. The reason is that you don't look, and I think we just have to begin there, because I don't know nothing about Russia, and I know nothing about China, or even not the beginning. But I think that's where we have to begin, and not see that this whole process of globalization, liberal feelings is the norm. Maybe there's a lot wrong with it, but it's the norm, and the others are reacting. It's the same with the discussion, and then I stop with it. It's the same with the discussion we see here in the Netherlands. You see, Rutte is doing something, he's going for things, he's following a line, and the others are reacting. And I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing for here, for example. What people here try to do is come up with their own initiative, their own ideas of about the world you want to live in, instead of reacting what the government is doing. Yeah. So that's my point.
Thank you. Thank you. Ja, ik wil graag het panel bedanken. Thank you panel for your valuable contribution. Thank you so much for your time.
And Peter, thank you for the leading of this discussion. You did excellent job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've learned a lot. Thank you for having been here with us. Thank you. Thank you very much.